Well, it's time to go back home. We had a great time celebrating Thanksgiving with family down in Texas. So we're going to make our trip back, and I looked at the weather forecast. We're going to have much better weather on this trip. On the way down, we had 25-mile-an-hour headwinds, and it killed our range. So I'm looking forward to this being a much smoother drive headed back home. So let's take a look at what we have. All right, so here we go. We have 968 miles to go. It says 17 and a half hours, and I'm really hoping we can stick to that because we're on Central Time, so it's 5:54 a.m. Central, so it's more like 7 Eastern at home. So if we leave now, we should be home by hopefully midnight. That's kind of the plan. Now, I am on a 12-volt outlet right now, so I tried very hard to skip this charger, but it's just not going to happen. So even when I try to skip it, we have to drive right by it anyways. So we are going to have to stop in Sulphur Springs, but we're going to make our way all the way over to, it looks like, which is interesting because usually we go up through St. Louis and over. So we'll keep an eye on that. That might change between here and there, but we will just have to wait and see. So far we've done just shy of 1,000 miles, but remember, we lost 175, 180 miles that are missing on this. And that is because the first leg I forgot to reset. So anyways, a terrible 356 watt-hour per mile. So I'm excited to see how we do today with much better weather. That said, it is kind of chilly, so that is going to have an impact. So with all of that, we're going to say our final goodbyes and get in the car and hopefully hit the road in the next 5 minutes. And Sulphur Springs is 70 miles away, about an hour and 15 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling here any minute. So we just pulled into our first stop, 28% at 723. That leg was 71 miles exactly, 29 kilowatt hours, 403 watt hour per mile. Still a little chilly. Hopefully we get above 50 here very soon. I'm supposed to be here for 20 minutes, and then we'll head to Texarkana, which is 97 miles from here. So let's get plugged in, and everything is closed, but it is a cool little town. All right, so it says we have 5 minutes left, but we should arrive at about 14%. So we're gonna go ahead and unplug. 97 miles to go, an hour and a half, be there about 9 o'clock in the morning. And it did update our route finally. So as you can see, we're going up through St. Louis now, which changes our arrival time to 11:38 p.m. Central. Anyways, about 15 hours of a trip left in front of us. Gonna go ahead and unplug at 63%, should arrive at 15. So we arrived at 13%, 98.8 miles, 37 kilowatt hours consumed, 373 watt hour per mile. It's just still so cold, and the heat is running, and that is really hurting us, but could be worse. I'm gonna go ahead and plug in. We're supposed to be here for 30 minutes. And this is the one that's at the Olive Garden parking lot, which is convenient enough, but there's also like an Outback over there. And I think there's a mall back there, so there are some decent options around here. And of course, on the way in, there's some stuff to grab as well. So we're gonna let this thing charge up and get us to our next stop. All right, we should be closing up charging now at 75%. We have 132 miles to go, about 2 hours. Should be there about 11:30-ish. I am gonna go ahead and unplug. Should arrive at 12%. Gonna unplug now, 75%. Be there in a couple hours. right, so we arrived 133.4 miles, 45 kilowatt hours consumed, 338 watt hour per mile. It's supposed to be here for 15 minutes, I believe, but it's pretty full, so 13%. Gonna go ahead and plug in now. Well, we've overcharged a little bit because we are eating some lunch. Pretty good lunch, huh? Yeah. So we're finishing up lunch now, and we're gonna be overcharged, which is unfortunate because the next one is a V3. I might be able to make up some of that excess charge driving a little bit faster, but I don't want to go too fast. Right now it says we'd arrive at 23%. Now this next charger, we have to stay and charge all the way up. So it's going to be 50 minutes probably to stay at that charger. That is because there's a big gap between that charger and the next one. So we're gonna finish up eating and then we're gonna hit the road. So we are at 61%. We are good to go. Should arrive at 26%, which is of course way too much, but it should be a 76-mile drive, only about an hour to get there. So we're gonna unplug and go now. So we arrived 23%. I tried to burn off some extra energy, but somebody had to go potty anyways, so that's how that works. But 78.6 miles, 29 kilowatt hours consumed, 363 watt hour per mile because we were going pretty fast. We are in the mid 50s now, which is super helpful, and we're supposed to be here for 50 minutes. So let's get plugged in. So it is a V3 charger, and there's actually quite a few dining options around. Not the best, like mostly fast food and a Chinese buffet over here, which looks closed. But there is a grocery store right there, and it looks like they're kind of rebuilding this whole area. So we're gonna take some time to relax while we're here. We're supposed to be here almost an hour anyways, so we'll get out and stretch our legs, huh? Mm-hmm. Murphy, you wanna go too? Murph! Hey, Murphy!
You were on the chair.
All right, so we're at 94%, and I'm gonna unplug it once it hits 95. So it says 5% on arrival, but it's been sitting at that for a long time. So as soon as I unplug, that's gonna update. 195 miles to go, almost 3 hours, and it's because it's this long stretch, and that is to not have to stop in Memphis and go all the way over to plug into that charger. So it's worth it to make this stretch. And then these chargers up here, we're gonna mess with a little bit, but for now, 195 miles to go, about 3 hours. So it should be there about 4:40 p.m. Gonna go ahead and unplug now. So after that brutal stretch, we arrived at 3%, 196.4 miles, 66 kilowatt hours consumed, 337 watt hour per mile. All right, so we're supposed to be here for 55 minutes, but we're not gonna do that. But for now, I'm just gonna get plugged in and we'll look at this and I'll show you what we're gonna change. All right, so here's what we're looking at. Instead of doing this 1 hour long stay here, we're gonna split this up. There's no point in staying for a full charge at any station. This is only 103 miles away apparently. And if we put that in, it says we only need to stay here for 25 minutes. And it is, let's see how many miles. 119 miles, a little under 2 hours. So that's what we're gonna do. At 20%, we've got a little bit of charge to go. It says 20 minutes. So we're gonna let it charge up to about 60-ish%, and then we're gonna head to this next charger in Mount Vernon. All right, so we're all charged up, 70%. We should be able to make it to Mount Vernon with 15%. I am gonna unplug and let's see how far we have to go here. 119 miles, a little under 2 hours, be there about 7 o'clock. And I'm gonna go ahead and unplug now at 71%, arrival at 16. So we arrived at 12% and we're supposed to be here for 30 minutes and then it switched our charger to the one in Terre Haute. So I'm gonna go ahead and get plugged in. We're probably gonna get something to eat while we're here because there is a restaurant inside the hotel and there's a McDonald's and such, but we're gonna get plugged in and get this finished up. It's actually kind of a bummer because a lot of these stations have been pretty full. So right now we're splitting charging, but hopefully that'll change soon. Now, the question becomes then, do you go inside, sit down and eat, or do you do something quicker and hope that it changes? It's always really hard to know exactly what to do, especially when you're trying to keep a schedule. At this point, we would get home at 12:30 in the morning if everything stayed on schedule. But anyways, I mean, it's the holidays, so a lot of the stations look exactly like this. So that's honestly why V3 is so important. Just not even sharing the charging is a big piece of that. And on our trip to Florida, we had V3 all the way down until we hit Florida, which was awesome. This trip, there was one V3 charger. So it's interesting in the middle of the country how it continues to get neglected, but hopefully V3 continues to roll out, and even faster V3, maybe even V4, whatever that 300 kilowatt charge rate that they're talking about in the future. That sounds great. So anyways, I'm gonna figure out what to do about dinner. And then just like that, there's nobody. So actually, we started getting full charge shortly after we went in. And by the way, the food in there was actually really good. So if you're hitting this supercharger up in Mount Vernon, I think we're in Mount Vernon, wherever we are, that restaurant inside of the DoubleTree is actually really good. So might be worth the extra time. We certainly overcharged just taking the dog on a walk. So we're going to finish this up. I think we only need to stop one more time and it won't be for very long. So once we get to the next charger, that'll be it. We're only like 240 miles away from home. So we are going to go ahead and get in the car. Let's take a look at how full we are because we are almost 100%. All right, so there we are at 93%. And it looks like our next stop will be for 15 minutes in Terre Haute. It is a V2 charger like all these so far. So only 15 minutes there, but it's 140 miles away, about 2 hours to get there. So I'm gonna go ahead and unplug now. Should be there about 28%, 29%. All right, so we've arrived at Terre Haute at 19%, 140.9 miles, 54 kilowatt hours consumed, 381 watt hour per mile. I think we're only supposed to be here for, 20 minutes, and we probably don't even need to be here that long, but it is already down to 42. I guess it keeps fluctuating. It was 38 a moment ago, and that cold weather just really hits on your efficiency. So I am going to go ahead and plug in. We'll stay here for the full 20 minutes to finish up the last 98 miles. So going to go ahead and get plugged in now. All right, so as we're finishing up charging here, looks like we only have about an hour and a half to go. Should arrive around 17%, at 65% now. And the nice thing about this charger, even though it's not a V3, is that it's in a Meijer parking lot, which is super convenient because you can get groceries or food, or if you need things like a pillow and blanket, I guess you can do that too. There is a Culver's right over there too, which is pretty good food. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and unplug, finish this up. It says we'll be home right about 12:40, which is not too shabby. I'm actually pretty happy about that. We expected to be home about 12, so only 40 minutes off for about 1,000 miles. That's not bad at all. So anyways, unplugging now at 66% and gonna finish this up. All right, so we did make it back last night about 12:40 in the morning, which is great news. It was a great trip. So let's take a look at how we did. All right, so that last leg I have lost because I charged it last night. My apologies. Total trip 1856, 660 watt-hour per mile and 356 watt-hour per mile, which is terrible. I'll talk about that in a moment. I am missing 175, 180 miles on this because of that first leg, but it was pretty straightforward. So a couple of things on this trip. It was cold and the headwind on the way down was terrible. So I almost didn't make it to that charger between Illinois and Arkansas. So that headwind was brutal, and with that there's not much you can do. Add in the cold temperatures and that wind and you're just going to get worse efficiency. So the only thing you can do in those situations is slow down, and sometimes that means doing under the speed limit. Now fortunately for us, we were like right on the cusp, so it wasn't terrible, but it did not make that leg go very fast, that's for sure. As we go into winter, something you need to be aware of: the colder it gets, the worse your efficiency is going to be. Regardless of if it's windy or not, or sunny or cloudy, your efficiency will go down. You're using heat, and there's a lot of physics involved with the density of cold air versus warm air. So there's a lot of things happening that are going to reduce your range. Now, the other thing that I noticed on this trip, autopilot and phantom braking is worse now than it's ever been. I remember in our last car, we just had basic autopilot and it worked really well. The only thing I wish it did, which it does now, is auto lane changes and things like that, which we have with the full self-driving package that we have on now. So I tried this in several different ways. I turned beta off, absolutely. So if you're doing a road trip, make sure you turn full self-driving beta off if you have it. What I ended up doing is I would switch back and forth between navigate on autopilot and not navigate on autopilot. And what I was experiencing was, when on navigate on autopilot, I feel like phantom braking was more frequent, but I can't prove that. So it seemed like, though, when I turned off navigate on autopilot, phantom braking was less. I also noticed at nighttime it was way worse than it was during daytime. So this vision only system, in my opinion, is having trouble determining if there's an object in front of you or not. I don't know what that means. I don't know. I can't prove that for sure phantom braking is worse now, but it certainly feels a lot worse than it did previously. So hopefully, as we transition to vision only across the board, Tesla is paying attention to this and they get this fixed. It's going to take some time, of course, but it is definitely noticeable on phantom braking, and it's jarring, especially at night. If it just all of a sudden thinks there's something in front of you and it just hits the brakes hard, it definitely jerks everybody in the car. So something to be aware of. Now, other than that, I still would way prefer having full self-driving or just basic autopilot than any other car. It just makes the drive so much better. So anyways, that's the trip. I wish I could tell you how much it was in supercharging, especially with the new charging rates that they have with the 4-tier system. The car just doesn't tell me anymore what it would have cost and then just deduct it from my free miles. But I don't know how much it costs. Generally, in the past, a trip like this would have cost about $100 to $120 in charging. So roughly something like that. Certainly way cheaper than gas would have been, especially with gas prices right now. So anyways, that was the trip. all 5 of us fit. We had my wife, the 2 boys, and the dog, and everybody did great. We had all of our luggage fit, and I mean, it was tight, but we did great. It was an awesome trip. I so enjoy doing these road trips, and I wish time allowed me to do more of them, but it just doesn't. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, of course, give it the thumbs up. If you haven't already, of course, subscribe to the channel as we continue to post content regularly. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Bearded Tesla. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.